Okay, we're going to get started, folks. So people want to find their seats, order a final drink, order some food, please go right ahead. My name is Phil Robertson. I'm the moderator for this evening's film and panel. We're going to see the film Full Circle, which is a story of finding local opportunity amidst global crisis and innovating viable solutions to the world's impending plastic pollution problem through inclusive community participation. And we have a full panel that's going to join us after the movie and say a few words about not only the movie, but also their projects that they're undertaking to tackle issues of plastic pollution in the seas as well as environmental conservation. We also have the director of the film who's going to say a few words after the film talk about the project. But before we turn on the film, I just want to say that there's a couple other events that are going to be coming up at the FCCT, what I want to let you know about. On Monday evening, 25th April, there is going to be an event by the Global Alliance Against Trafficking Women. This is an event, What Do We Not Know About Human Trafficking and Human Traffickers? So it's going to be an expose of GATW revealing their latest research about the world of human trafficking. That will start at 6 p.m. and it's very interesting. I hope you'll come by for that. Also on Friday, May 6th, the clubhouse will be open for piano night and a jazz jam. So on Friday, May 6th, if you don't have plans, come by for a drink and some music and some singing. All are welcome. So now let's turn our attention to the film Full Circle. I'm going to ask Dom to dim the lights and we'll see the film.
สวัสดีครับผมสุรายามาจากเกาะเหลาครับอายุ54ปีครับหลานชายชื่อสบุญครับนี่ลูกสาวชื่อดาวผู้ตกหลานชายอยู่คนเก็บขวดอยู่ครับผมเกิดที่เกาะเหลาใช่ไหมคนพี่ญาติรุ่นพี่มันก็ชวนทำงานทีแรกก็อยู่บนเรือดูเขาทำงานแบบไหนยังไงเขาดำน้ำแบบไหนเราเขาดำได้เราก็ต้องดำได้ใช่ไหมอายุประมาณ13-14โมเกนเขาวางปูไม่ได้ก็วางกุ้งถ้ากุ้งไม่ได้ก็ลงใต้น้ำเราต้องหาบางทีก็มันมุดทรายใช่ไหมมุดทรายเราเห็นที่เดียวเห็นตามันอย่างเดียวตอนนี้ก็พอเก่งแล้วดำน้ำเก่งแล้วก็ซ้อนลูกชายแล้ว2 คนไปดำปีตอนโควิดเนี่ยมันทำงานมันลำบากก็ปูก็ไม่ได้เจาะหอยก็ไปขายไม่ได้ขายก็เขาไม่ซื้อเขาไม่รับซื้อไม่รู้ขายตรงไหนถ้ามันถูกทีนี้ก็ไม่รู้ทำยังไงเลยก็คิดไปมาก็ต้อง เก็บขวดเดียวว่ามันคายง่ายกว่าดาวให้พ่อไปเก็บดาวบอกว่าพ่อทำอะไรไม่ได้แล้วค่าทำอะไรมันไม่คุ้มค่าน้ำมันค่าอะไรก็พ่อต้องเก็บขวดให้มาเลยก็พ่อเก็บ
Hundreds of million tons of virgin plastic are produced per year, and only 10% are recycled. So this is one problem. And as the lifespan of a water plastic bottle is 450 years, it means that plastic pollution won't disappear like this overnight. Then, of course, you have the monsoon season here in Thailand. So when you have heavy rain, then you have plastic, leakage into the ocean, traveling through rivers. And so in 2016, we had the first idea to set up a recycling center. For us, it's important to work with local coastal communities. The main goal is to have a social impact. And then with the founder of the National Geographic Foundation, we had this idea to set up a vocational center to help the Moken to find a job. So yeah, we started the project in January 2020, so it was just before COVID and not easy times. And for some of our workers, the problem is quite simple. If you don't get paid today, you won't eat tomorrow. And that's why we continue to collect plastic. We had to inform the Moken on island also about the project. Okay, we are here. I mean, we can pay a higher price. We can help you, to make an extra income if you want. But now I'm quite happy and I'm quite proud of our achievement because we have many Moken on different islands working with us. And for us, it was really important to have them with us and to be able to pay them and continue to work together.
IUCN, as one of the leading global conservation organizations, also got invited to become part of this issue, pointing towards understanding plastic pollution in the marine environment. And so then we started working with our global team to look at how this project should be targeted, beyond just modeling and data collection. What could we be doing with our partners that would start to support them in the needs that they have?
So we launching a grant program, 50,000 USD, and with this funding, the concept is that we looking for someone who can demonstrate the circular economy concept for plastic that reducing the leakage of plastic to the marine environment. We received 9 proposals, and one of them was submitted by Jan and Oscar Foundation. And the project that they proposed was, for us at that time, circular economy is very new concept. So when we read the proposal by Jan and Oscar Foundation, mentioning about the Morgan as a guardian of the sea because they live there and the impact from the marine plastic really affect their livelihood. So at the end, this project become the winner among the 9 proposals that were submitted.
ก่อนหน้านี้เกิดขึ้นซาลามิก็อาจารย์เป็นคนซื้อที่ดินให้มอร์แกนมาอยู่แล้วก็มอร์แกนก็ทีนี้ก็เขาแบบซื้อเรือบริจาคมอร์แกนทำบ้านให้มอร์แกนอยู่ปัจจุบันก็มอร์แกนก็อยู่เรือ
ตอนที่มีโควิดเราก็ลำบากแล้วก็พอเราวางปูวางกุ้งมันก็ไม่มีเลยพอเราไปขายก็ไม่ค่อยมีราคา
ผมคิดว่าเห็นพี่ก้อยเก็บขยะมาเห็นพี่ก้อยเก็บไว้ขายรายได้พอได้ใช้ทางครอบครัวเล็กๆน้อยๆก็เลยผมเห็นชวนภรรยาไปเก็บด้วยช่วงนั้นก็ประมาณอาทิตย์นึงได้พอเมียผมแยกเสร็จผมก็พาไปนองพอขายได้500 โลทั้งหมดก็ขายรวมก็ได้ 9,000 กว่าบาทครับ
Another word is น้องแม่ใช่ไหม
The Moken people are sea gypsies, so they're nomads.
บังเบนโอ้ไปถึงเกาะกำมานะอ๋อนี่บังเบนแล้วเหรอ บางเบน4 ชั่วโมงไม่ใช่เหรอคะ
They can be seen in Thailand, especially between Thailand and Myanmar. Their relationship with the sea, I would say, is special because everything would rotate around the sea, the food that they eat, the work that they do. Since their parents are not registered as Thai citizens, they don't have access to social welfare, education, or medical care. And these vulnerabilities are exaggerated, especially during the pandemic. In the COVID situation, we don't have the toilet come to the island, and when they have the fish or animal feed they sell to the restaurant, it's not a good price for them and not enough for pay for all family for them. So when I come here, I have to coordinate them, like invite them to be my collector. Like I give them more job. You can be the collector for me. You collect the recycle waste and you can sell to the non-recycle. And we fair with you. We can give the good price with you. We help you transportation and whatever you need equipment or you need the net bag, we can support that for you. When one Morgan family know about the good price of the non-recycle, they start talk together. Like we help them a lot, and now that's why we have more collector from the Morgan.
โอเค8 โมง
When we first thought about this project, we thought about something that could help the Moken people, but of course, it can be also beneficial for other groups of minorities, for the Burmese migrant workers or people from Muslim communities, for example, that can also be part of this circular economy.
ก่อนหน้านี้ประมาณ16 ปีที่แล้วนะครับผมทำอยู่กับบริษัทแห่งหนึ่งหรือว่าโรงงานแห่งหนึ่งครับค่ายอยู่ประจำเจอพลาสติกก็แต่ละเดือนมันไม่ต่างกันนะครับนะบางทีละ2 ถึง 3 คนก็มีนะต่อเที่ยวก่อนนะครับนะต่อเที่ยวนี้เที่ยวละก็ประมาณ4 ถึง 500 ลูกครับแล้วก็มีวันหนึ่งที่ได้มาเปลี่ยนมาค่ายตีระนองรีไซเคิลเข้ามาห้าลูกค้าที่เกาะเซ็นให้เนี่ยคือปกติผมจะค่ายที่อื่นเลยแต่แกมาเสนอว่าคือสมมติว่าทางโรงงานอื่นเนี่ยเขาจะให้โล5 บาทสมมุติโล5 บาทถึงทางระนองรีไซเคิลเขาจะเพิ่มตรงนั้นเป็นน้ำหนักเป็น2 บาทก็เป็น7หรือว่า8ประมาณนี้ครับประมาณ7-8 บาทเรือเพิ่มในโลละ2 ถึง 3 บาทต่อโลบางตัวบางอย่างผมก็เลยสนใจมันนึกคิดได้ว่าวันนั้นแกฝากเบอร์โทรไว้ก็เลยลองดูครับตั้งแต่วันนั้นก็ประมาณ1 ปีเศษๆครับผมดีใจครับมีความภาคภูมิใจมากๆที่ได้และก็ยินดีเป็นอย่างยิ่งครับที่ได้รู้จักกับน้องรีไซเคิลหรือว่าทางทีมงานที่บ้านแล้วก็มีวันนี้ดีใจมากๆครับ
Right now in the normal recycling market, plastic is plastic, regardless of whether it comes from mainland or ocean. And so they're bought at the same price by recyclers, even though, of course, they're vastly different. Collectors of ocean plastic need to spend days out in the hot sun digging out plastic from the beaches, aggregating enough volume, and then making a 1 to 2 hour round trip by boat to the mainland to sell it. And so you can see that the costs of collecting ocean plastic are substantially higher. So what Second Life does is to raise this market price for ocean plastic to account for these extra costs. So a plastic credit is a way for companies around the world to engage in funding plastic recovery and recycling projects in areas and communities which need the most support, usually in countries or places where the plastic waste infrastructure is underdeveloped and vulnerable. One plastic credit represents 1 ton of plastic recovered or recycled that wouldn't normally have been otherwise. In our first year of operation in 2020, we recovered and recycled 600 tons of plastic from Thailand and Bali areas. This year, we expect to recover and recycle almost 2,000 tons, with next year increasing still to 5,000 tons from Thailand and the wider Southeast Asia region.
The idea is that you can offset your dependency or need for plastic by removing leakage of plastic into the system somewhere else. I will pay for my rights to continue to use primary plastic by buying, X number of kilos of ocean-bound plastic that will offset that continued need that I have. Now, there are lots of ethical and moral discussions around should plastic credits exist? Is it providing outlets for companies to get away with a continued dependency on plastic? But it is an innovation, and so in simple terms, that has generated a revenue that we can now redirect into providing this premium price at the local community level that then incentivizes communities to collect PET and other valuable plastics that can then enter back into the value stream.
To collect ocean-bound plastic has a cost, and someone should pay for it. And so there are different possibilities. We really need to find a solution to cover transportation costs for collectors. And this can be done with our partner Second Life, and thanks to plastic credits. We need also buyers, good quality buyers of our product. And Tide Ocean Material is our main partner, but it's for PET bottles, so PET bottles and PP bottles, so that's what you can see here. But then you have many other types of plastics. And this is one challenge. It means that we need to find solutions for all types of plastics. And of course, it will take time. Now, the next step is fishing nets, so nylon fishing nets or plastic fishing nets. And we are running this project in partnership with the Environmental Justice Foundation.
We started the Net Free Seas program here in Thailand about a year and a half ago now. First of all, it's trying to solve an environmental crisis of fishing net waste, which is washing up on our beaches. It's also trying to work with the communities along the coastlines to try and give them an alternative livelihood. So supplementing their income from fishing by allowing them to then recycle their disused fishing nets and turn those into new products. It's also trying to give social gains as well, by empowering these communities to feel that they're actually part of the solution in terms of waste management. So usually we have community members that will be collecting the nets for us. They'll then pool those nets into a bin or a collection point, and then we'll have a network of local partners as well working with us to then collect those nets and then ship those nets to our recycling partners.
We are trying to scale up the project in Krabi, at Wong Panit Krabi, the big recycler. For us here in Ranong, it's really a small project. It's a pilot project, but at least we can test different models, different options. So for now, we are working on the Andaman coast, but then we could also extend the project on the Gulf of Thailand, working on other islands such as Koh Samui, Koh Phangan, Koh Tao. But this is maybe for the coming years.
So here, Wong Panit Krabi, we have all the process of facility to facilitate all the plastic from the bale into the flake. We collect ocean plastic from Ranong Recycle up to 100 ton to our flake factory. And we make the flake for about 80 ton out of 100 ton. That is the really perfect PET, and put into the container or bags before delivering to our manufacturer. The number of 2020, we collected 335 ton, while in 221, we increased our volume, even though we have COVID, to 1,000 ton.
Tide Ocean Material is a premium and quality material made from ocean-bound plastic waste. We are, for instance, collecting plastic bottles, and we give them a second life so they become a long and durable good. Tide Ocean Material stands for 3 different types of products: granules, filament for 3D printing, and yarn for textiles. All of these products are made from ocean-bound plastic waste that we, and together with our partners such as Ranong Recycle, collected on islands and along the coastlines in Southeast Asia. So far, we have processed 25 million plastic bottles, and this happened within 2 years. So our goal is that we double the amount every year. Our mother company is Braloba, and Braloba Group is one of the world's leading watch strap manufacturer. Braloba produces different kind of straps, from leather to vegan. And the idea of Tide Ocean Material came up when Thomas, our founder, he was looking for an eco-friendly material and was asked by a watch brand hey, is it possible to take ocean plastic and transform this into a watch strap? So we went into research and it was actually possible, and it's a great proof of concept that you can use this material to create so many different products. Our task is to be a B2B company, so we deliver the material to other companies and brands who produce their very own branded products. Maybe one of the more famous examples I can tell you are watches by a famous watch company called Luminox together with Bear Grylls. So these were watches that were produced and made from our material. Or there's the Italian fashion brand Yamamai. They launched the very first bikini completely made from ocean-bound plastic. And the good thing about these bikinis, people can bring it back to the shops after 2 or 3 years and it will be recyclable again.
So with Net Free Seas, what we've always tried to do is make sure that we've localized the entire project within Thailand. So that's why we prioritize finding companies such as Quali that are forward-looking, progressive, dealing with plastics already, and have this vision to start making really creative, aesthetic products that can use these fishing nets.
When COVID-19 started, we were contacted by EGF. So since then we started to use the material, trial and error, because until today it's still very difficult to get them ready to become the raw materials that we can use it right away with the product. So this is a coaster made from the fishing nets. This is the cotton bud holder. It comes in the penguin. This is the turtle for the magnet. So you have the magnet there as well. So you can hang it on the fridge. This is quite new. Foodie for food waste in the condo or in the house. And then we try to use the new basket for shopping basket for the fishing net. And the latest one that we just launched 2-3 days ago, this is a collaboration work with the Pattani artists, Losin Island. There are like a lot of fishing nets there under the water, and then they pick them up. But we use the fishing nets from the land before they go into the sea. So that's the wild shark and the teacup. So they're sold out in like 1 day. So people who wants it now have to wait for a month and a half. Sorry about that.
We live on this boat together in the dry season. Our son lives with us on the boat, and we're dipping into the old way of life of the Moken. During COVID, we were approached by Michel, so we met in Ranong, and he decided to include us in the grant to employ us as the Moken ambassadors. There's many different perspectives on this initiative, because when you live in a hierarchy, the trash picker is at the lowest end. Whereas if you live in the circular economy and you live on a fair trade base, then the fishermen or us actually collecting the trash out of the ocean, to them we're on the same level because we work in the same initiative. It can grow on possibilities and initiatives, but it cannot be forced top down. Of course, there's not a lot of money for it in collecting trash, but if it supports a way of life that already exists and brings in some extra income, the self-initiative, the feeling that you're doing it and you're dedicated to do it, I think that's the part that connects it.
We cannot recycle plastic and pretend that it's going to be the only silver bullet to prove that marine plastic can be sold. It's not enough that one group of people try to collect plastic from the sea, but how we work together to implement, how we can ensure that we can reuse, refill, recycle.
And so we are seeing now the opportunities to share the knowledge about the Jan and Oscar project and the model that they used across Thailand, but across other ASEAN countries as local level solutions and innovations. And so the investment is now coming to actually look at, well, what have we tested on the ground? What are the innovations, the incubated ideas that are starting to produce fruits in terms of solution? And so we will continue to work on building awareness around what is existing out there. This project, it's about sharing those ideas and making sure that the partnerships and people that are ready to be on board to play their role are able to access those opportunities.
Yeah, find your proper space there, folks. Yeah, I think the... Okay. So that's a fantastic film. Full circle. I'm glad Nat Geo picked it up and helped you produce it. And it's very great to have this kind of program here where we can talk about a specific project and talk about a specific concept. So I'm going to start off by asking actually Ban to talk about the film that he filmed and to explain about how it came to be that he was involved in this, but also how this really worked out. How did the project come together, and all the ups and downs throughout the entire process.
Does this come on automatically?
Yeah, no, it should be on.
Thank you so much, Phil. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here for the screening. Hope you liked it. So a quick introduction to the film. It was made on a discretionary grant from the National Geographic Society that was given out during the 2 COVID-19 years to focus on transitions or processes that people and especially communities around the world were going through during the pandemic and how they were adapting to the lockdowns and certain hardships and problems with livelihoods, etc., that in their own local spheres. It coincided with me meeting my friends and colleagues at IUCN, so that's Maeve right here, and Vivi, who was unable to join us today because she's out in the field. And I did get to know about the project, which I will let Maeve and Nick and Dominic speak about very quickly in a bit. So the project was basically a circular economy exercise where people were involved in a community-based initiative that looked into harvesting, recycling, and upcycling ocean-bound plastic waste. And through the 2 years of the lockdowns, it sort of doubled as an alternative livelihood for the Moken community in Southern Thailand and other communities in the coastal areas. And it was also instrumental in putting together this innovative business model where ocean-bound plastic waste could be harvested and recycled to create new products of everyday or luxury use to be put back into circulation and public consumption. So I will let Maeve and Nick and Dominic take it from here and introduce you to the greater details of the project and how it came about. So I was just, on my part, I was just capturing the story, but I think they are better positioned to tell you more about the project in greater detail. So Maeve, Nick, Dominic, thank you all for being here. Maeve, would you like to take it from me and please tell the house about how...
let me just introduce it. This is Maeve Nightingale that we're going to hear from next. She's the head of coastal and marine programs at ICUN Asia. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome everybody. It's great to see everybody turn out tonight for this really interesting discussion. As mentioned, I actually head the coastal and marine program for the region for IUCN, and just one small component of our program deals with the issue of marine pollution. Marine plastic pollution. If I'm really honest with you, I knew nothing about this issue until about 3 years ago. But because it affects our oceans and it's a downstream issue, it's something we needed to get to grips with really, really quickly. And in 2012, there was a lot of data and statistics out there about how 6 countries within the Asian region were named and shamed as the worst coastal plastic polluters, and Thailand was one of them. And this brought about a really important political commitment by the governments to start looking into how to change policy and how to deal with solutions that improve circular economy thinking on the ground. And so IUCN started actually even 10 years before that looking at the issue of microplastic. So we had a lot of data and statistics, a true IUCN style of doing things, get the science first, understand the problem, before we can try and look at the management solutions. And we did that in Thailand. We started there looking really at the national level. What is happening in terms of leakage into the environment by marine plastic? And what we found, now it's 2020, 2019, was there was very little data, but we put together the data that we had, and there was an estimated 336 kilotons of plastic leaking into the environment within Thailand. So we looked at where the hotspots of leakage are happening, what kinds of products, what kinds of polymers, what are the waste management systems issues that need to be looked at, what are the policy interventions we need to look at and improve. But we also had some grants to look at investing in local solutions. And this story is all about what has come of a $50,000 grant, which I think you can see has leveraged a whole lot more than $50,000 worth of value, if you like. And it's all down to our partners. So Jan and Oscar, who received the grant out of a competitive process selected by government, and then the partnerships that they built with Second Life, with Dom, and with you. Thank you, Ban, for telling the story, because we all knew our different parts of it. To be honest, I don't know if we all knew the whole story, and you put it together for us. And so that's what it is. So in addition to working at the policy level, the science level, and with private sector to look at their own, what they can do, especially within the context of extended producer responsibility, these small grants looking at innovations, local level, circular economy models, that's what this story is all about. Thank you.
That's very, very succinct, very clear. Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to ask Nick Supatravanick, who's the program manager of Second Life, to say a few words about his involvement in the project. Second Life is the world's first Vera certified ocean plastic recovery and recycling project. So over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and also for Bun for obviously including us in this documentary. I think that what Maeve said was exactly right. There's really so many partnerships and so many entities really involved. I think we didn't even know probably some of the other people that were involved in this whole value chain. It's obviously a very, very big problem. And that's why there's so many people that have to be there along the value chain to support it. So Second Life is actually a part of a larger company called Pure Project, and Pure Project has actually been focused in the carbon space and carbon offsetting space. And so really where we started was actually one of our clients in the French cosmetics sector named Codely was essentially asking, you know, we've done a lot for carbon, planted 8 million trees worldwide, what kind of actions can we take on the plastics front? So that's really kind of the goal here, is to really bring some private sector funding into this and actually bring, you know, essentially this the system of plastic credits into the whole space, and really, I think, support the ecosystem that's already there. You know, we don't really want to come in and compete with the local collectors. If anything, we want to work with the grassroots organizations as much as possible. I should also note that I think plastic credits, you know, as a new mechanism, I think there's definitely a lot of ethical questions around it. And I can tell from the people around here, I think there's also some questions that are going to come up. But I think, you know, for us, really, the point is that at Second Life, what we really want to see is that we don't really want to exist at all. You know, what we want to see is that, I mean, even along the Vera guidelines, which is what we're certified under, the very, very first steps that private sector and companies should take is actually to reduce their current plastic footprint. So reducing plastic from actually being produced in the first place is obviously a lot easier than collecting it once it's there. So I think that's really the goal, and really where we kind of serve is just that last step. You know, once companies have reduced everything that they can, and they're maybe in this transitionary phase, moving towards zero plastic, how can they, you know, kind of work and feed back within that space? And yeah, so that's where we fit in.
Great. Okay, now next I'm going to ask Dominic Thompson, who's the Deputy Director of the Environmental Justice Foundation, to speak a little bit about the Net Free Seas project and the involvement in this project. So.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. And thanks very much for inviting me, Ban, and congratulations on the film. I think what your film does really well is tell this story and connect all of the dots with the communities, with the private sector, international organizations as well. So I think I think that's the really powerful message that this film shows, is that it's the importance of joining all of these like-minded individuals together and giving them the space to work towards a solution. So I think that's where we sort of try to fit in as well. So just a little bit of context. Environmental Justice Foundation, we really started looking at ocean issues from an illegal fishing perspective and also looking at overfishing. And so around 2.5 years ago, we were working on these issues, and we realized that we were always coming across ghost gears, which are nets which we find in the oceans, but also discarded gears that we find on beaches as well. And so we really wanted to try and find a solution to this, and provide communities a way out as well. So reducing the environmental harm that these nets are causing, but also giving them social and also economic gains as well. And so that's how the Net Free Seas project was born. And so now we work with around 130 communities all across Thailand to collect these nets and then send them to recyclers such as Quali to then recycle into new products. And I think what this film, you know, talking about communities and empowering people to be part of that solution is really, really important. Because very small grants like this one, and also very small pilot projects like Net Free Seas, can have huge impact by just working with local communities and giving them the tools to actually be part of the solution.
Great. Everybody's like giving speeches that are much less than the 7 to 10 minutes that I gave you.
We can go on.
But I will say that you know, this is fascinating. I mean, obviously, I spend a lot of time working on human rights issues, so I don't spend enough time thinking about this environmental space. And it's fascinating to me to see the way that this project has come together. And I want to ask you all about, I mean, obviously the Moken as an indigenous community has been severely disadvantaged over the years by various different government policies, not only in Thailand but also in Myanmar. So I want to ask you how it was working with that community and basically being able to build trust that, you know, they were going to be able to do these things, which at the end, you know, you had the Moken German couple who sort of raised the issue that, like, the status of a trash picker was considered to be low. So you're going to try to persuade people to do something that they wouldn't normally do. how did you, for instance, overcome some of the perhaps trust issues or other issues that might be there in dealing with the Moken community?
I'll just start off, and then Nick, I'm sure you have some kind of examples of the specific islands as well. But actually, this was one of the key points that when I read that initial proposal for the grant application from Jan and Oscar, I thought, well, how does that sit? Like, we've been working with the Moken community on human rights issues, on access to environmental resources, on protected areas management. And now here we had this sort of opportunity to develop livelihoods around plastic, knowing the stigma that goes with it, which is inherent in that. And these were all the questions we actually raised at the beginning with Jan and Oscar, to say, we don't really want to reinforce any of the issues in terms of sort of compounding the status of the Moken community within Thai society. And what actually happened in reality was we do still continue to work through other projects on issues of human rights and access to resources, and looking particularly at access to environmental resources within some of the protected areas in this Ranong site. So there are other programs that are very much directed at that issue, and this piece was sort of an added bonus to see how it would work. In reality, the project didn't focus only on the Moken communities. In fact, the uptake is across coastal communities, and particularly with island communities. And the key issue, the sort of to contextualize this, is, these island communities are key consumers of these products. There are 7-Elevens on the islands, they're depending on plastic, but the cost of actually removing this plastic from the island is prohibitory, in that it costs more to collect and transport it to an island than you would ever make in terms of the market value for that plastic. So the kind of clinch piece here is that Second Life is able to offer this premium price that internalizes the cost of transportation of those islands. So it is a solution to actually start recovering some of those materials which would otherwise be stuck on islands back into the system, and seeing where it can go from there. So if it weren't for that, and the economic incentives that come with that, to be honest, and on the back of that, the organizational capacities, which are critical enabling conditions for standing up and having voice on other issues which relate to resources management, has actually somehow over 3 years combined to have a sort of quite some positive outcome, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's I think all of the things that you've said we would probably align with. For the Moken community there specifically, with Hook and Lena, I think the point there was that, especially when you have a market-based system, it tends to kind of grow organically. The community that we found there, especially with the high dependency on the Syrian islands for tourism, and then obviously during the COVID period that was essentially non-existent. And so that was essentially something that became, as you mentioned, a livelihood for that system. It's something that we found actually replicated not only on obviously the Syrian islands, but then also islands like Kotlanta, all the other islands around Krabi, Ranong, other areas where there are island communities in it. And it's not just, it's also schools, it's also local collectors. There's also people who used to be tour guides who actually then turned into waste collectors during that period. So it's kind of a means of, I suppose, figuring out, you have this huge resource and this huge amount of waste that's there. How can you actually derive value from it, not just from the material itself, but then actually enable it to create some kind of social good around. I think that's, I hope that answers the question.
Excellent. The floor is open, so if people have questions, you're welcome to go back to the microphone in the back. Please introduce yourself. If you have an affiliation that you want to share, please share that as well. And welcome any questions from the audience.
I might just add.
Please go ahead. Go ahead. No, you got to go to the mic.
Hi, my name is Tony Watts. I'm interested in the whole recycling of plastic.
obviously PET has a value already anyway, and that's clearly something that's being recycled. Is the community collecting other plastics? If so, what's happening to those?
Yeah, so I'll answer that. I think that's an excellent question. So PET, you're right, is a very high value plastic. It's probably the highest value plastic. It usually goes for around 6 or 7 baht per kilo on the normal market. Even at that price, it's still prohibitive for the collectors to actually collect and then deliver that back to the mainland. So even if it was just a pure PET cost, and then you might bail and kind of collect around 500, and then take it on the longboat back to the mainland to be recycled, because you can't have a recycling factory on an island in Thailand. So essentially, yeah, even with that cost for PET, if you're buying just doing PET specifically, then that wouldn't work, which is where we apply the incentive. For other materials, that's a very, very good question. We do also collect that. So we do about 30 to 40% is other materials. So that's low value plastics such as LDPE, PP, PE, and then also a lot of ocean waste, just a lot of flip-flops, a lot of flip-flops, a lot of styrofoam. A lot of this waste really just wouldn't be collected at all. And actually, yeah, so what would normally be happening prior to, I think, 2020, before we actually started within these islands, was that they would essentially just move the plastic onto a beach that wasn't being used, and then they would dump it there. So I think there was actually some footage of that collection there. Or it would just be open burned, which is obviously not the ideal situation. And technically, there are mainland laws around this, and the islands are technically covered under mainland jurisdiction, but the mechanics and the practicality of the implementation is just not there.
Yeah, so the fishing nets are mainly from nylon material, which is also quite a high value plastic. And so nylon can be recycled into all sorts of home consumer goods, like Kuntas was telling us about in the film. And like Nick was saying, that a lot of these communities are just burning this plastic at the moment. I was in Samui just a couple of days ago and went to one of these fishing communities where there was this pristine blue nylon fishing net, half burnt on the beach. Maybe 500 kilos had been burnt already, and that's probably worth around 4,000 baht if you can collect it. But the problem is that these communities are just completely disconnected from existing waste management systems. And so with the Moken tribes as well, there isn't the infrastructure in place to collect this kind of plastic. And so they are left with no choice but to dump it on another beach or to burn it in their community. So it's a travesty, really, that this is the situation, that these communities are being forgotten by the government. And they've also probably contributed the least to plastic pollution in the first place. A lot of the plastic pollution is coming from wider society. It's coming from the mainland. It's drifting over to these islands, and these communities are now having to deal with it. And let alone they're having to deal with the problems of overfishing, illegal fishing, climate change as well, and now they're having to suffer from plastic pollution as well.
Other questions?
I'll just add a little piece on there.
Please.
It's just to raise the sort of the kind of important position of the Wong Panit Krabi franchise in. One of the things that these two brothers have committed to, so they're the aggregators on the mainland, if you like. So we're working in a number of islands there, and they're the aggregators buying the plastic, and in partnership with Second Life. If it weren't for their commitment actually to buy what we call this residual plastic, the plastic with no value, it probably wouldn't be happening. They have made this commitment. There are two brothers that are quite engineering specialists, and they're looking for solutions with other partners on what we can do with some of these very low value plastics. There aren't any easy solutions right now, and there's no incentive to collect it, but they've made this commitment alongside collecting and buying the PET to actually try to collect a portion of it and look for solutions on that.
Yeah, I would also add that with non-recyclables, I think is, maybe that's one of the benefits of also having this supplementary plastic credit mechanism, is that we're actually able to fund the collection of this otherwise plastic that absolutely can't, you can't do anything with. The best solutions that we found right now are RDF, which is a resource-derived fuel, which is essentially when you take the low-value waste and essentially shred it and then burn it for waste recovery, so energy recovery. Obviously we don't want to burn plastic within that controlled environment, but it's really the best solution that we have. We've done experiments on, for example, all the flip-flops, which are made of EVA materials. And sometimes they've just been degraded for so long because they've been out in the sea and the sun and the sand. So I think that if you ask anyone kind of working within the plastic industry, I think they'll probably say that non-recyclable or low-value plastics is the biggest problem right now of our that we're just, everyone's trying to look for a solution for.
Sorry, question, is that a pyrolysis, like very high temperature?
So pyrolysis, I think, is slightly different. So pyrolysis is essentially when you take the waste and then decompose it back into kind of like an oil to be burned. What we find is that the costs, like with anything, it's all a business. So the costs for that are very prohibitive, and especially the capital investment costs. We spoke with a Singaporean startup which was working on a pyrolysis machine, very, very interesting, and I think they were doing a partnership with Nanyang Tech University, so NTU. But I think just the cost for one pilot machine was about $1 million. And so if you think about what's kind of the depreciation costs and the timeline for that, it's just not an economic thing to do. And sadly, that is kind of the reality of the situation, is that there's a lot of very, very promising solutions out there. Chemical recycling is probably the most promising, where you can actually take the plastic and then break it down back into polymers and then reconstruct it. But the reason that doesn't happen is also cost.
Primary plastic is cheaper.
Yes, way cheaper,
Right.
isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah. It's all about the money. Now, ideally we're sort of on the back end of the COVID crisis. Certainly the Thai government is spending a lot of time thinking about how to resuscitate the tourism industry. If tourism does in fact pick up during this new high season coming sort of October, November, you'll have a lot more people going to the islands. Perhaps some of these communities will then go back to what they were doing before, which is sort of working in the tourism sector. Are you concerned that post-COVID that this model may sort of lose collectors?
My impression.
Please speak in the mic.
My impression while doing my research and my filming was that, and I'll leave it to you to take it from here, but it is also a highly seasonal activity, because the monsoons are when there's more plastic in the ocean. Not to say that there isn't any plastic in the ocean in the other months or the other seasons, but it kind of works as an alternative economy or an alternative livelihood and usually the monsoon months are when it's the lean season for tourism. So you can probably go back and forth between two professions or two livelihoods, and it kind of supplements during the lean phase. Would you want to?
Yeah, I can add to that.
Yeah.
What Ban is saying is exactly right. So the monsoon season here in Thailand is around July to I guess the end of the year, and that's really when just so much plastic washes up with the currents. It's also the time when the fishermen can't obviously go out into the sea because of the high waves, and so you're seeing that essentially it is kind of a seasonal thing. I think also just from the engagement that we've had from the community, we've found that I would say that there's really no problem. I don't think that we've really found that it's a supply side problem. I think there's more than enough waste. I think that there's more than enough communities that are actually getting more engaged to collect that waste. Because they, we talk to them and they do also feel like it's a good thing. Like they say that now they're actually able to keep their beaches clean and the communities that they work along, and then also obviously get some livelihood and income from it as well. So
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's really a supply side problem. I would say that it's more on a demand side or policy level where the big blockers are. So it's more private sector engagement as well as policies to actually support things like EPR schemes or ESG policies.
But I think also just touching back on what you said earlier, Nick, is like you want to be out of business, right? I mean, the ultimate issue about the increased number of tourists, so 30 million tourists per year in normal times, is that incremental increase in single-use plastic. And no matter of how many innovations we're having in circular economy, we need to solve the single-use plastic problem. There's no way of sustaining the kinds of volumes of consumption that we have in normal times. I mean, this has got to be tackled. And many of these single-use plastics are very low or very, very low quality in terms of their recyclability or value. So in a way, it's a different issue. It's not that this model is going to solve or be a sustainable model. It's about the issue with the kind of return to normal life and return to normal numbers of tourists will be tackling this issue of single use. And it's a big issue. 74 kilograms per capita consumption of plastic per year. 74 kilograms. That's twice what the average is for other countries. So every human in Thailand is consuming 74 kilos of plastic per year.
74 kilos of plastic.
Kilos per year. That's double what it is in most countries. It's double the average.
Is there any incentive coming from the government to tackle this, like this statistic that you just mentioned?
Yeah, the government has a roadmap which has set targets, particularly for single use, and even for some very specific products like the polystyrene. It's now to really translate that roadmap into some sort of measurable statistics and solutions. We have a really interesting opportunities, though, from private sector who are leading the dialogue in terms of finding solutions. There is a sense of responsibility from private sector to contribute to the solutions. And this, EPR extended producer responsibility that companies can put products out on the market and then take responsibility for retrieving those materials. There's a lot of uptake around this dialogue, and there's a special committee formed, which was formed like 4 years ago now, called PPP, Private Partnership, Public Partnership, under the Prime Minister to have these dialogues about what private sector can do. And at the end of the day, Thailand is an exporter and an importer of plastic. So there's a big incentive to keep that primary plastic economic value chain going as well. So it's tricky. There's a lot of political interest from the petroleum companies. So plastic producers are just a subsidiary of petroleum companies. So it's a tricky one. It's like about economic growth under national government, but also taking responsibility for the environmental impacts of this consumption. Yeah.
I'd say that it's definitely slowed down, though, that the impact that the government's had in terms of trying to tackle single-use plastics. COVID really set it back, of course, especially this perceived sense of hygiene that's attached to using single-use plastic, and we've all probably been using takeaway food containers as well. If you've stayed at hotels recently, you have to wear those horrific plastic gloves as well. So this attachment to hygiene has really set us back, and it's certain ministries are just not responding to the science. The science says that COVID isn't transmitted through surface contact, it's airborne. Probably should be wearing masks, really. But so I think that we have been set back, and Thailand was making really quite promising moves towards tackling single-use plastic before COVID. So it really is a shame how far we've gone, probably 10 steps back here in Thailand. So how long is it going to take to get back on that roadmap?
You mean on the personal protective gear issues? And the testing
PPE, but I think also takeaway food containers, single-use plastics in general. It's all come back with a vengeance, really.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was saying to someone that actually I was on a motorcycle taxi coming from my house over south of Sathon to here. This was on a Thursday, and I counted. I just, for the fun of it, I was on the back of a motorcycle taxi. I counted 84 food delivery guys that I saw on the way over. So the amount of food that is being delivered in plastic containers now every day in this city is absolutely off the charts. Grab, Robinhood, Panda, you name it, Line Man. I mean, it's shocking.
Yeah. And even back in 2020, when we did that initial data, look at the composition of dump sites, 70% is coming from food and beverage containers. So 70% of plastic.
70%.
Yeah.
My God.
Can I just say, as somebody who collects a lot of plastic on the beachfront, I don't collect a lot of masks. I'm not seeing that stuff. It's all the same stuff that it has been. It's shoes and all the regular rubbish. This is down south.
Right.
I understand a lot of this is bad, but it's the whole problem that's I'm not sure it's added to by the pandemic, to be honest. In these communities, I think in Bangkok probably the amount of plastics gone up.
Okay. Do we have some more questions from the audience? I mean, the floor is open. We have a very expert panel here. Talk all aspects of marine pollution and plastic pollution. Yeah, go ahead, please. Why don't you?
So hi, my name is Tove Goldman, and I just also spent Songkran at some of these beaches collecting plastics and so on. So thank you very much for a great movie and a good discussion. This is a very inspiring project, but how do you see the prospects of it actually expanding and replicating in other places, not only in Thailand, but also in the region? I don't know also if IUCN is using this as a model in your work, or also if you combine it with more upstream policy work. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is expanding within Thailand already, just in terms of the number of islands, et cetera, But it's a model that we've replicated in East Africa as well. So it's a very similar model with this similar kind of startup grant fund. So, but Nick, maybe you can speak more about the growth.
I think I would probably speak to more maybe the idea of the plastic credit mechanism as a whole. I mean, what it's really there to do is to nurture the ecosystem as much as possible. And so what that means is that we work as much with the local regional players that are already there and really not coming in as competitors trying to set something new up, but working with the system that's already in place and then seeing where are the gaps in that supply chain and then filling those gaps. So for example, in Thailand and on the ocean plastic sector, where we find the gaps are related to things like fuel costs and the increased costs for collection on ocean islands. And so that's something that, you know, that's a situation that you'll also find on Bali, which has similar problems. Their problem is more related to the distance of recycling centers. For example, if you have central Bali, it's actually more difficult for them to kind of access and transport that way. So there's still higher transportation costs there. So we do actually work as well in Bali. We did about 100 tons in 2020 and then about 250 last year. So that's in Bali. In Vietnam, we work with a factory that actually works with low value recyclables and has a process to essentially upcycle that and then turn that into new value waste. So it's really this idea of bringing in funding and bringing in funding to the places where the ecosystem is lacking it the most. And so in that case, I would say that it's very replicable in any other place. Yeah.
And just to add a little bit, I mean, just sort of the other half of the coin in terms of like this creating value chains approach. We've worked in Koh Yao Yai before the Ranong project with a very different approach, which was really about building awareness and social cohesion along the island and looking at the issue of health and waste. And it was about really supporting through the health worker kind of outreach programs, the knowledge about what good waste management looks like, reducing consumption, but also improving waste management. So it was long before there was even any incentive to collect and sell the plastic. It was about looking at social cohesion and improving with the local government policies that would improve waste management, and understanding the issues really about what products are coming onto the island, how could we reduce our consumption, and how do we manage the waste just within the island, 3-island system. It is now linked with the value chains that Second Life offers, but it was really about building that sort of social capability and the local policies and government awareness, which then lends itself to a whole load of other issues. So plastic is just one issue in terms of marine resources management. Most communities, island communities, their primary interest is tourism and fisheries. And so it's also then, about that integrated management approach. And this model is something that's quite well established now, both at an island level, but also supported at a policy level.
What's been really interesting as well is finding that communities who live next to participating communities see the benefits that Net3 sees and these projects are accruing for those communities and actually want to take part. And it's almost you see this rippling effect, chain reaction, as communities see that they're getting benefits from selling plastic bottles or selling fishing nets, and they want a piece of that action as well. So it's actually a really easy way to replicate it, just by getting communities to talk amongst each other and sharing experiences and knowledge. We've actually seen communities taking it to the next level, where we haven't even been a part of that, where communities have built their own cleaning stations to take fishing nets, clean them, put them in almost like these washing machines, and then have them ready to collect by the recyclers, and actually attaching even more value to those nets. So there's a huge amount of potential that's there, and having communities front and center just means that these solutions can almost be expedited. So yeah, it's very exciting. And so we've gone from 0 to 130 communities since the summer of 2020, already now replicating to a pilot project in Ghana, which is another geography that we work, and also looking at Indonesia to try and replicate Net3 Seas there.
That's great. Let me ask you, this is all this work that's being done. You're talking about the communities, you're talking about the private sector, you're talking about the NGOs. Where's the Thai government in this?
Oh, I thought. No, I'm sorry. No. I know you're smiling, but actually, the Department of Marine and Coast Resources have been very active in this project, and I just shout out to Pisawan in particular, who has supported the concept level. He actually was part of this national committee to select this particular project. So they've taken a very keen interest in both the design and monitoring the progress on in the field as well. So yeah, no, they definitely take a very active interest in it. Now the key thing, of course, is connecting that site level story and this model with a sort of more opportunity to replicate it and upscale it, and how can we leverage government support to do that? I think in reality it's going to be coming through this public-private partnership kind of concept, because you have got private sector investors interested, and it's for the government then to just have those policies in place that make that create that enabling condition for those investments. So we'll continue to work on that part.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to add as well, I think it does boil down to quite maybe a classic problem in Thai politics and Thai government, is that there's not that much communication between local, regional and national government. And so we have local level municipal authorities doing one thing, national government telling them to do another, and so there's never this synergy between those approaches. And that just means that communities are left by the wayside. There's just no infrastructure at all, whereas others have lovely, glitzy incinerators and other facilities. So I think that's a major problem. And I should just probably say for the record that we do also work with Department of Fisheries and DMCR as well, and so they've been very supportive for our project.
And actually, one thing, just to add on to the policies, the disconnect, if you like, a small little thing, was when we did that sort of initial data fact-finding mission, it was understanding those institutional frameworks. And in fact, local government budget is allocated in terms of the volume of waste which is created. So there are incentives to have more waste when it comes to allocating national funds for resolving waste management. So there are two issues. One is there are incentives for having larger volumes of waste. You get more money to manage it. But then working with local government, so this is beyond the sort of national, subnational, but actually at local, district level. The capacity to actually innovate and understand how to solve what is actually quite a complex problem isn't across the board. You know, it's not a simple mission for local governments to know how to understand the waste management issue and then create local mechanisms for solving it. And so this is a specific area. In addition to working with communities, it's working with local government who have the responsibility. This is an entirely decentralized, devolved responsibility. National government washes their hands of it as soon as it gets to the provincial level. Here's your budget, do your best, right? So I think that support in innovating and understanding the issue and coming up with the right mechanisms is also critical in that local government engagement.
If I can, in the back. Mark Laban, I'm with AsiaWorks. If I can just take it one step further beyond the government. In terms of the source of the plastics, is IUCN in conversation with the manufacturers, namely Indorama, PTT, GC, the people who are producing the plastic and who certainly bear a lot of responsibility and perhaps should be figured into the equation. Is there anything you can tell us about your conversations with them and the responsibility they have for what we're seeing in terms of the amount of plastic that we're experiencing out in the ocean?
Yeah, the short answer to that is, you know, IUCN was invited to join this public-private partnership committee when it was formed, which has these players around the table, and the idea was that we could be a voice at that table and possibly even influencing those dialogues. I think reflecting on what Dominic was saying earlier, the vigor of those conversations and the commitment around that table has waned over the last couple of years, and it's very hard to get those discussions in earnest. One very specific policy area we tried to look at, though, was this banning of the use of secondary plastic in food and beverage products. So, you know, if 70% of plastic consumption is coming from food and beverage, and we can't use recycled plastic in food and beverage product development, then we're already shooting ourselves in the foot, right? And one of the reasons that ban was there, if I'm being very skeptical, is because it was protecting these plastic-producing companies. But this is now getting resolved, as I understand. You know, there is a big movement now to change that policy, which is a game changer, and that's a positive sign.
That'd be great. Secondhand forks.
Sorry, but it sounds like there hasn't been a lot of progress there with the manufacturers of plastic. No, well, in that there's they're very well organized plastic producers in Thailand. There's a cooperative of 150 organizations which are plastic producers, and their chair is very active in wanting to work with government to look at policies that then incentivize private sector to take their part. It's a chicken and egg. If there's no incentive, who's going to take the risk in terms of their own commitments as a private sector company in forging the way, because they lose the market. But, you know, no. Yeah, there is an eagerness to have that discussion, but also protect the industry.
I think I would also add on to that point, within the carbon space, there's a differentiation between voluntary and compliance. So there is the kind of the essentially how much companies need to do, and then how much they could do on top of that. And I think, you know, really where the carbon space has really boomed is when there's a lot of compliance and policy around that space, really particularly in engagement of volumes, really. So there's a lot of calculation for carbon on how much companies produce, and actually calculation of that footprint. And so then there becomes a huge differentiation between, hey, you know, we planted a few trees here versus we planted this amount of trees which offset, you know, 1,500 tons of carbon, which is what we produced in this year, and that's certified. So I think that, yeah, there's that kind of distinction. I would say that I don't think that Thailand has carbon compliance even yet. So I would say that just wait for us to get to carbon before we even get to plastic. So I think, yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I think we would definitely love to see more. but I also think it is a policy kind of stage at that point. So I think that's really where we're kind of saying, okay, well, we have the option to either wait for the local plastic producers and the local policies to get into place, or we can start accessing the funding and the markets and the eagerness and commitment of foreign companies, foreign private sector to actually get involved, which is where currently the majority of our clients are currently from. They tend to be from Europe and America, where there's a lot more engagement around ESG and EPR, which, you know, I mean, from an economic standpoint, you can understand why. You know, it's a cost to them. It's a part of their marketing costs. I feel like until there are huge significant waves around kind of tax reduction or even kind of tying plastic in with tax reduction, then you know, then it's, can't really say anything else.
And you know, just going back to the chicken and egg situations that Maeve was just talking about. So in my research, again, I came across, so just like you were saying, like there are several things that need to be figured out because things are still in flux. Like, for example, a lot of your partners being based in Europe. So to merely send the plastic from Thailand to Europe incurs a carbon footprint, right? So it is really a chicken and egg situation. Like, and then like Dominic said, so the ultimate solution is to try and find local partners. So you don't ratchet up a carbon footprint in trying to solve the plastic problem. So yes, I guess solutions are probably still being found, and it's in a bit of a flux. So that was something that I came across as well, and I think it's a question I posed to all of you, and then
yeah, but I guess at the end of the day, what we find is just the market is a lot more efficient at finding these solutions and putting them together. I mean, even from policy level, as what Dominic said, you know, there is a national guidance and national roadmap. But then, as Maeve said, once it gets to the provincial level, what we find is that it's kind of a, you know, he said, she said kind of situation, and then, you know, essentially who suffers is the communities, and the communities that are actually there with the plastic and no one really there to collect it, and so they have to burn it or find their own kind of ad hoc solutions that are technically not legal, but otherwise they would just be living in mounds of waste.
And just to maybe final point on this is that we do see a lot of these big corporates really scrambling for alternatives to single-use plastic, and some of those, you know, are for the betterment of society, but also they are trying to find cheaper solutions as well. And one of those rather disturbing new ventures is bioplastics. So this is something that we're really worried about, and the recycling sector, I think, is also really worried about as well. Is these plastics which are derived not from crude oil, but actually coming from foodstuffs, so potatoes, starch, they can actually be boiled down and made into these plastics, which look and feel and act just like normal plastics, but you can't actually recycle them alongside normal plastics. And so for waste pickers, it's going to become a complete nightmare for them, as they are having to then try to differentiate these two identical plastic bottles. One of those which is perfectly recyclable, PET, very high price, but the other is actually bioplastic and can't be recycled at all. And if you mix that bottle in with a perfect batch or bale of PET bottles, you could actually taint that entire supply and make that plastic completely worthless. And so this speaks to the whole issue of not thinking forward enough ahead into the future, and actually giving future generations and leaving them with this massive problem that will actually require massive amounts of investment to allow these recyclers to be able to actually identify this plastic in the first place.
You're going to have some sort of scanner that basically tells you that this is bioplastic versus non-bioplastic.
Yeah. And it's really only at the industrial level that you have these scanners. So you can't expect your Lung Saleng or your local waste picker to have this handheld scanner or something that can tell bioplastic from normal plastic. So their livelihood will be at detriment by this new technology, which these corporates are hailing as the holy grail. And the reason that they're really going for bioplastics is because they supposedly say that it can biodegrade and be degraded in a composter or degraded in landfills, but sadly that's not actually the case in most cases. So really, we're left with a lot of this bioplastic which can't be recycled and won't biodegrade at all.
We're talking about bioplastics that are actually bottles as well as now?
They can be cutlery, takeaway food containers, anything, and you wouldn't be able to tell if you looked at them.
Wow. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm James. The panel mostly knows me. I'm from TerraCycle Foundation. So we're an ocean cleanup operation here in Thailand. I just want to add on to what Dominic was saying. So TerraCycle in the US surveyed all of the people who do bioplastics. There's only 8 companies that claimed that they actually process bioplastics in North America. And out of that, when we contacted them directly, only 1 was actively collecting them and recycling them. So the idea that they can be processed is, as he said, I just wanted to back you up, Dominic, because with some actual numbers, so 1 recycler in all of North America will accept them. So the idea that they can be composted and recycled is complete false.
So bioplastics are basically a marketing scam that's going to screw everything up. Okay. And here we thought it was something that was good. Anyways, all right. Any last questions? We've had our panel up here for quite amount of time, but want to give everybody a chance to have a question if they want. Yes, please go ahead. You have to go to the mic. Sorry.
Sorry, so about this bioplastic bit, I guess I'm just curious, it's the first time I'm hearing about it. How is it justified, or what aspect or element of it allows us to do something about this? Because it seems like it's one evil replacing another evil, but it's even worse in some ways. So just as a curious person who doesn't know much, what's justifying this, what's making it happen, what can be done about it?
So the justification comes that these companies are trying to find a material which they can put into a compost machine and it will just degrade naturally over time. And they say that it can take maybe 30 days to degrade. And when we think about compost, we immediately think, oh, I can put it in my home compost bin and it's going to disappear in 30 days. Sadly, that's not actually the case. You need a proper industrial composter, a huge facility that's kept at a certain temperature, certain pressure, all of these considerations, and then that plastic will degrade probably over 6 or 7 months. And Vivi, our colleague, she's even done studies where she's put it in a home compost, and it just is almost good as new when she's pulled it out 6 months later. So these companies are just selling a lie, really, when we're talking about bioplastics. And I know we're getting off topic a little bit here.
Keep going. This is interesting.
The other problem with bioplastics is that they are coming from foodstuffs. So if you're talking about soya, potatoes, other grains and starches, those could actually go to feeding people. And instead we're diverting that to make bioplastic, which then doesn't degrade and can't be recycled.
Yes. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Whitney Small. Actually, to that point, exactly. The substitution of value, right? The substitution of the value of food versus the value of plastic has been very much in the minds of quite a few governments and states in the US as well as in Europe. And it really does come down, doesn't it, to a basic understanding that there are 2 sets of people who are making money on this. One is the resin makers, and the other are the injection makers or the packaging makers who are then using that packaging. And there are a lot of states in the US, provinces in Canada, one in particular that is looking at this as well as in Europe, that say, wait a second, why is it our business to take care of this? Why shouldn't we be assessing a lifetime tax of the lifetime of that plastic on the resin makers who are selling it or the product makers who are distributing it, so that that money is then attracted to take care of the recycling? Almost like a bottle tax, a super bottle tax in many ways. But isn't that part of the problem, that the very makers themselves are going to try to find all of these avenues, and bioplastics is just another one of those? Where's the answer to these people? And Mark mentioned a couple of those players, but players are huge all over the place. And if we have even states looking at laws about that, Why aren't we looking at the same? I'll take my answer in a second.
I agree with all the points.
Yes,
yes.
I mean, I think with the bottle taxes and the bottle schemes, like in Europe, you have these amazing systems where you have single-use bottles, but they are being taken back to the supermarket and being recycled into new bottles. And so you've actually built an entire industry that is a circular closed loop, and it works really, really well. So in Scandinavia and Germany, there are great examples of these schemes working, yet it doesn't actually benefit the Thai companies because they would have to put that infrastructure in place. And if we go back to bioplastics, the problem with these plastics is that those companies would have to put the infrastructure in place and invest in the technologies that can help them recycle these bioplastics. But if the government doesn't tell them that they need to do that, then they can just get away with selling this very cheap food-derived plastic and just keep on getting away with it.
I don't know, I'm sort of eager also not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, you know, there's a whole discussion going on about clear labeling and looking at the life cycle of these types of materials. And I think there's still a lot more to be understood, and systems clearly need to be improved in terms of collection and processing of these types of materials. Certainly, you know, even this, just going back to the sort of traditional plastics that we're dependent on at the moment, you know, even this figures that get bandied around about 450 years, these plastics are going to be in our system. No, these plastics that we're using traditionally are going to be in our system forever. They're just going to be tiny and microscopic. They'll never decompose or biodegrade, right? So we're going to have to be a little smarter at looking at alternative materials and making sure we have the systems to understand them and manage them properly, including, you know, the labeling and processing. So, yeah, I'm apprehensive to throw bioplastics, the concept, out completely. I've got a long way to go, though.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea of course, of perhaps clearly labeling on a label that on the bottle, like this is a bioplastic and this isn't.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, it's a new issue. I've never heard of it, so I find this fascinating and frightening. So, okay. Let me thank the panel very much for coming. Let me thank Ban for introducing his fantastic film to us, which I understand you can view for free.
So yes, the grant allows me to freely distribute this with other media outlets who are interested in distributing it on their own networks or platforms, with due credit to National Geographic Society. It will be available on the internet through FCCT and as well as on YouTube and other platforms. So yes, I mean it will be freely available for viewing for whoever wishes to see it, and yeah.
Right. Okay. So if you're interested in sharing it on your network,
yes,
here's the man to talk to.
One could get in touch with FCCT actually, and then
FCCT,
yes.
or BON or others. So we can certainly. I mean, we obviously want to promote this film far and wide. So anybody who wants to promote it through their network is certainly welcome to do so with the appropriate credits to the National Geographic Society. Again, thank you very much for coming. Please stay around, have another drink, and we hope to see you again at the FCCT soon. Thank you.